Well, the very fact that we're talking about it means it does matter, because you can deny people the futures they like or they want, but you can't deny them the past. And that's a very interesting idea, because the viewed objectively, the Jarrow March was a failure. I hate to say that, because it's such a romantic part of British working history and industrial history and northern history and all those things. But in terms of what it did for the men, it was a failure in what it did for the town. The petition got lost; it never got handed in. Stanley Baldwin, the Prime Minister at the time, wouldn't see them, and Jarrow didn't get any richer. Well, not for a long time. The Second World War came along quite quickly, but the fact that it's still talked about, the fact that it still used to be on the national curriculum, the fact that it's had such a pop cultural influence, from Alan Price's hit record to our friends in the North, I think that those kind of things mean that if it kind of still exists as a sort of touchstone for not dissent really, but sort of endeavour and fortitude and all those nice qualities about people coming together and saying we want something better for ourselves and our town. If it's even remembered even kind of shakily, I think there's something in that. Well, that's interesting, because in my researches, what some people think is that, it was the Jarrow March, because you remember we were a divided Britain then and now, and when the Jarrow Marches got to places like Market Harborough, or even when they got to Ripon, fairly prosperous rural and market towns, often people kind of didn't believe that anybody could be living like they did, and when they told them firsthand how they were living, and were sincere, people thought, well, this is shocking, and rather like the king did at the time, something must be done. So a lot of people feel that it was the Jarrow March and what the sort of shock waves that set up that actually contributed just after the Second World War to the setting up of the welfare state. So yeah, maybe the benefit system and the NHS and things like that, maybe they are to some degree there because of Jarrow. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, part of my thinking was, let's see if Britain in 2016, late 2016, when I did the walk, because I retraced the walk, what can we learn? What can we see? What echoes can we see, if any, from 1936, or am I sort of pressing a point and crowbarring it in? But I don't think I was. Then Ramsay MacDonald and Jeremy Corbyn look like very similar people. Things change, but back then their poll ratings and their reputation and their perception seemed very similar, as unelectable and incompetent. Tory party returned to power, the increased majority, austerity now, recession then, divided Britain, strongman populism on the rise then and now. It's Trump and Putin now. It was Hitler and Mussolini then. EDL on the streets now, Mosley on the streets then. Very similar, I thought. It was lots of echoes and lots of resonances. And you're absolutely right that walking through Britain post-Brexit felt very much like, felt there were echoes of it, of the difference between the Jarrow world and the world of the so-called metropolitan elite. And it was interesting, Jarrow in 2016 voted very definitely to leave the European Union. And I thought that was interesting. I wonder what the Jarrow men would have thought of that. I think there's a difference. I think there's a difference. I love the difference. I'm very much of the opinion when the great Nye Bevan was once challenged on his liking for nice hotels and lobster and champagne, he said only the best for the working class, and I think that's quite. I'm very much. I agree with that, and I yield to no man in my admiration for fine dining in London and stuff like that. But I do think there's a difference. I think the industrial. I think the natures of the work we did. That's maybe not quite true in a London once upon a time, but I think the nature of the work that perhaps was done in places in the more rural agricultural areas and the industrial north, I think it makes the landscape different, and it makes the work different, and then that's bound to make the culture different. But I think sometimes we artificially talk up these differences, and I hope I'm not being guilty of that. But certainly in terms of, you only have to look in an estate agent's window, as I did in Radlett and in Chesterfield Street. The vertiginous, rise is dizzying, and I think there are lots of things that's exactly the same about England today. I found out everywhere in England, regardless of its socio-economic status, has got a vaping shop, a tanning salon, and a hipster barbers where you can get your beard waxed. But beyond that, there are still quite a lot of differences.